واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Respected brothers and elders, mothers and sisters in Islam, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us in the company of the righteous in this world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise us amongst the righteous on the day of Qiyamah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill our lives with mercy and rahmah, as all of us are in the need of the rahmah and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, last week we began a topic from the hadith and the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he mentioned to value 5 things in our lives before they are replaced with 5 other conditions. And the reason for us to begin this particular subject is that by and large that we are living in this world where we are seeing so much, subhanAllah, chaos and difficulties in the lives, and so many difficulties that come across so many people in the world. But when it comes to our own personal lives, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept us in such comfort and ease, there doesn't come a time where we as people ever become, subhanAllah, grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The sense of complaint never leaves our lives, where we really have to see the larger picture of the globe to truly feel blessed in our own lives of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Brothers and sisters, for many of us, this past month and a half has opened our eyes to the blessings of our lives more than it has for decades of our lives already. For many of us, the gratitude and the shukr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the bounties and blessings that every single one of us, even though we may be going through some of the most difficult time according to us in our lives, have all become so easy for us that my own difficulties don't feel difficulties anymore if I was to look at the larger picture in the world. And that is what Rasulullah ﷺ reminded us from this very beautiful hadith that we began last week. And the first portion of this hadith, where the Nabi of Allah ﷺ said, "Ightanim khamsan qabla khamsin," that value the 5 that you have before the conditions can change in your life, or they could be replaced with the 5. And the first thing Rasulullah ﷺ mentioned was shababaka qabla haramik. Value the young age that Allah has given you before the old age arrives. The time that changes quickly in our lives, the ability and the strength that we're able to accomplish and do things. And brothers and sisters, as we all know, the greater the sacrifice, the greater the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The greater the sacrifice, the greater the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reward of sacrificing your youth and your young age, which is a period of energy and passion and ambition and temptations from all sides, is far greater in reward for sacrificing when you're old. And that doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not accept the ibadah of a person who's old, but it just reminds us that how important it is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you that energy, that temptation, and all the things that are around you, and just a blink of an eye you have access to all of this, and then you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have the consciousness of Allah during that in your life. So hence the period, the person who spends their young age in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the selected individuals, according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, to be given a place beneath the arsh and the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ where he mentioned that on the day of Qiyamah, the sun will begin to come closer to an individual that will be only a mile away, and the earth itself will become of iron and steel, where a person will begin to sweat according to the sins that they have committed. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, there will be individuals who will be sweating up to their ankles. And then the Nabi of Allah ﷺ said, some to their knees. And then the Nabi of Allah ﷺ said, some to their navel. And the Nabi of Allah ﷺ was Sadiq wal Masduq, the most truthful, the most trustworthy. The Nabi of Allah ﷺ took his right hand and he pointed towards his mouth. And the Prophet ﷺ said, some towards their mouth on the day of Qiyamah. And they will be sweating according to their own sins on the day of Qiyamah. And then the Nabi of Allah ﷺ further said, in the midst of all of this, there will be 7 types of people who will find a place beneath the throne and the shade of Allah, when there will be no shade except for the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's throne. And may Allah make us from amongst those brothers and sisters, from amongst those who find the shade in the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the 7 types that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, he said, is a young person who obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or a young person in their youth, in temptation, struggle to live their life on the obedience of Allah, and they are called upon something of evil and wrong, and he or she says, I fear Allah. I fear Allah. The consciousness of Allah, the awareness of Allah, and the fear of Allah reminds them of turning away from that. So brothers and sisters, the importance when Allah has given us life, Allah has given us strength, Allah has given us power to utilize this in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Before a time comes that a person becomes too weak to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They become too weak to do what they can do, while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them the energy. In Surah Al-Kahf chapter 18, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentions the sleepers in Surah Al-Kahf, reminding all of us that they were youth. And the reason for this highlight was the respect and the reason that even though they wanted to follow their temptation, they could, but they obeyed the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the reason why the majority of the people who accepted Islam at the early stages, when there was no one to support Islam, were the Quraysh of Mecca, who were all young people who listened to the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. People who are older in age tend to set their own ways, and thus it's very hard sometimes to make them accept the truth. And that is why very few of the Quraysh amongst the elders had accepted the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So brothers and sisters, and I see some young faces, and mashallah, all who Allah has given energy, the youth should therefore change their ways and come towards deen more than ever now. By seeing the conditions across the globe, it is now time for us as people to change our lives towards deen. They are the ones who should not become in doubt of their deens and come towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, when a person who takes care of plants and gardening, when a weed begins to grow, when it's very weak, it's easy to take out. But when it begins to take roots, and when it takes deeper roots, you can't even pull it out with 2 hands anymore. When certain things become a part of our lives, it's very hard to take them out. And that's why they say, old habits die hard. It's very difficult to take away old habits that are created in our lives. So from this young age that Allah gives individuals and people to change our lives and come towards deen, and to value the moments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Because brothers and sisters, the time is so quickly changing. And for some who may not be at this very early age of their lives, where they can say that they can make those changes, we continuously make the effort. We continuously strive. But what else we can do is to inculcate these qualities within our children and our grandchildren, brothers and sisters. To inculcate deen in the lives of our family, in our children, and our generations to come. Strengthen their faith, strengthen their belief, allow them to hold on to the baton and the beacon of light for them. For once we are gone, they will become a source of not only blessings for themselves, but of blessings for all of us. So for most of us, create that deen, that religion, and that education and correct beliefs for ourselves. Create that for our families and for our children, and to instill this particular identity inside of us. And brothers and sisters, more than ever, I would say, and to be very frank, I'm a child who grew up in the post-9 era in the streets of Brooklyn, and a child who go to the public school system. It's a difficult world that we're in right now, but more than ever, do we need to create the identity of loving our faith, brothers and sisters. If we want our children to remain faithful to their deen and Islam and religion, us as parents, we need to live our life upon deen and religion. I need to showcase that I love Islam. I want to live my life according to Islam. It is not selective Islam for mothers and fathers and instill deen in the lives of our children. It doesn't work like that. It makes a change when I live a change. And I say this so often, brothers and sisters, our children don't listen to us. They observe us. They look at our lives. They look at our actions. They look at our deeds. They look at our akhlaq and our manners. So brothers and sisters, to conclude, as the hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ reminds us and teaches us that for the benefits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given all of us and so many bounties and blessings in our lives, let's value the blessings of our lives. Sometimes we get so taken away by the conditions around us that we forget to focus on the blessings of our lives. If we were to focus on the blessings of our lives, we wouldn't have time to even complain on the difficulties of our lives. Brothers and sisters, the Quran says, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you were to count the blessings of Allah, you wouldn't be able to count the blessings of Allah. So brothers and sisters, let's focus on the blessings of Allah from the hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ, these 5 things. And the first one that we talked about today, inshallah, will continue from next week. The first thing to remember is the young age that Allah has given us. And it could not only just be young age, but the energy and the strength that Allah has given us to live our life according to Islam and our deen. To be able to let go of our temptations and our desires for the pleasure of Allah. And whoever is able to do this at this time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will strengthen them in their faith as He promised the people of Cave. And Allah will honor them on the day of Qiyamah as amongst the people underneath the arsh and the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So brothers and sisters, my concluding message for me and all of us is to let's start living our life according to Islam and Deen. Let's value the blessings of Allah in our lives. Let's instill these beautiful values in the lives of our families and our children. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to live our life according to the Quran and the beautiful sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A few very quick announcements, inshallah, before we conclude. We have a Salatul Janaza right after the Salah. Inshallah, the sister of Brother Sa'ad Pasha passed away. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant her Jannatul Firdaus, grant sabr jameel and patience to the entire family. Allow the deceased to be amongst the companions of the righteous on the day of Qiyamah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make her grave spacious, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the journey for her, and of course all of those that we have lost, easy for them, and raise them amongst His rahmah and His mercy, inshallah, as well. If everyone can kindly rise, please fill up the gaps, inshallah. Once everyone has filled up all the gaps, inshallah, we'll begin the khutbah and the salah. And right after the salah, please stay in your space. Only the close relatives can come to the room where the body is, and they can line up, and inshallah, we'll make Salatul Janazah in our particular location before the sunnah, inshallah. Please fill up all the gaps. Please stand as close as possible.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha